My name is Gemma, and I am 29 years old. I was standing in my new condo on a gray Thursday afternoon in early October, boxes half unpacked, a cold cup of tea on the counter, when my mother called to inform me that I owed my younger sister the second bedroom. Within 72 hours of that call, my sister and her husband would show up at my building with a rented cargo van. There would be police. There would be a family group chat that lit up like a fire alarm at 2 in the morning. And then, 2 weeks later, at my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner at a restaurant in the Glebe, there would be a moment I had been quietly building toward all along. The moment a $130,000 secret stopped being a secret. In front of every person my parents had spent months trying to turn against me. But let me start from the beginning, and before I do, if you've ever had to hold a hard line with your own family, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Hit like if any of this sounds familiar. It is going to be a long one. I have worked as a project manager for a federal IT contractor in Ottawa for 5 years. It is not a glamorous job. It is methodical, detail-driven, and occasionally very boring, but it pays well, and more importantly, it trained me to understand that when something does not add up, you go to the source documentation rather than the summary someone sent you in a message. That habit would serve me more than I expected. For most of those 5 years, I saved aggressively, TFS maxed out every year. Spending kept tight, no new car, no expensive trips, no lifestyle inflation. I watched friends my age drift in the cycle of spending more as they earned more and just quietly did not participate. By the late summer of that year, I had enough for a down payment on a 2-bedroom condo in the west end of the city. I did not tell my family until the closing was done. That was a deliberate choice. My family has opinions about my decisions the way October weather in eastern Ontario has opinions about whether you need a jacket, constantly and without being asked. I wanted to walk through my own front door before anyone had a chance to weigh in. I signed the paperwork on a Friday, paid the land transfer tax, picked up the keys, and spent the first night on my living room floor with a sleeping bag and a takeout container of pho from around the corner. It was the best I had felt in years. That lasted 9 days. My mother called on a Thursday morning. I could tell from the first syllable that she already knew. Someone in my extended family had seen a post on social media about the move. She did not lead with congratulations. She asked whether the second bedroom had good natural light, and when I said yes, she said she was glad because my younger sister was going to need it. I asked who exactly had promised my sister a room in a home I had not finished moving into. My mother said the family had discussed it. I told her the family had not discussed it with me, which meant the family had made a decision without a fairly important stakeholder. I told her no, not an apologetic no or a negotiating no, just no. Her voice shifted, the particular shift I have known since childhood, the one that comes right before she stops persuading and starts pressuring. She told me I was being selfish. She said family helps family. She brought up sacrifice and blood and how I would regret this someday. I let her finish. I said the answer was still no, and I had to get back to work, and I ended the call. I did not change my mind over the weekend. On Sunday afternoon, I was unpacking a box of books when I heard a vehicle in the parking lot below. I looked out and saw a white cargo van reversing into a visitor spot. My sister was climbing out of the passenger side. Her husband got out from the driver's side and stood there with a duffel bag over one shoulder, already looking at the building entrance, like a man who knows where he's going. My parents' SUV pulled in directly behind the van. All 4 of them walked toward the lobby like they had been invited. I got there before they could buzz up. I opened the lobby door from the inside and stood in the frame. My sister was holding a box and smiling, the specific kind of smile that relies on the other person's discomfort to do its work. Her husband was looking past me toward the elevator. My mother, who had apparently been waiting in the car specifically for this moment, walked across the parking lot to stand behind them. My sister said their lease was up. She said they had nowhere to go. She said she had called the school nearest my address to ask about future registration, as though my agreement was already a settled fact she was building her life around. I told her she was not moving in. I told all 4 of them, plainly and without raising my voice, that I had not agreed to this. I would not be agreeing to this, and I needed them to leave the property immediately. My mother stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. She tried to push past me into the lobby. I stepped back and let the door close and lock. I called the Ottawa police. The non-emergency line sent someone in about 20 minutes. By the time the officer arrived, my parents had retreated to the parking lot. My sister was sitting on the bench near the entrance recording herself on her phone. Her husband stood beside the van with his arms folded, looking at the pavement. The officer confirmed I was the registered owner, explained in patient and plainly worded terms that my family had no right to enter the building without my consent, and they left. The van went first. My parents followed. The lot went quiet. I went upstairs and stood in my kitchen. About an hour later, the family group chat started going off. My mother had apparently been composing a message before she made it to the end of the street. In her account, my sister was being displaced through no fault of her own. I had slammed a door on a struggling family, and she was asking relatives to please reach out and help me see reason. They reached out. My aunt, who I speak to maybe twice a year, sent 3 paragraphs about the importance of blood. A cousin who borrowed $200 from me in 2021 and has acknowledged it exactly 0 times, since informed me that success had clearly changed me. A relative I had not spoken to in 4 years sent a voice note about her disappointment. I read everything, I responded to nothing. What I did instead was open my laptop. Project managers, when a project goes sideways, go to the source documents, not the meeting notes or the email summary, the original records. So I looked for the original records. The Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board maintains a public docket search. I entered my sister's name and her husband's name against their known address. The file that came back was not a renoviction. It was not a notice from a new building owner. It was an L1 application, a landlord's application to evict for non-payment of rent. The filing date was 11 weeks before they showed up at my door. I paid the document fee and read through the order. The arrears at the time of filing were just over $4,000, covering 4 consecutive months. The board had scheduled a hearing. Neither my sister nor her husband had appeared. The eviction order had been granted in their absence. The sheriff's enforcement date, the date they were legally required to vacate, was the Friday before they rented the van. They had known for 11 weeks. They had missed a hearing they had every right to attend. They had an enforcement deadline marked on a calendar somewhere, and their plan, apparently, had always been to show up at my door with boxes and assume it would open. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I looked at my sister's public social media. She had launched a wellness business earlier in the year with a lot of specific language: passive income, financial freedom, investing in yourself before anyone else does. There were unboxing videos of product shipments, screenshots of what appeared to be earnings charts, posts from a leadership retreat in Kelowna in August, and photographs from a brand conference in the spring that appeared to have been held at a resort in Arizona. The images were bright and expensive looking. The captions were full of momentum. I searched the company name. The Better Business Bureau had a page with complaints filed. A Reddit thread from former distributors explained the compensation model in detail. Purchase mandatory monthly inventory to maintain your status in the company, recruit others to sustain your income, receive a commission percentage that, after product costs, left most participants in the negative. The company made money at the top. Most people further down did not. The pattern was thoroughly documented. My sister had not fallen into a housing crisis by accident. She had been redirecting her rent money into supplement inventory and conference registrations for the better part of a year. The eviction was the natural endpoint of that. I kept going, because there was still something I did not understand. My parents had a 5-bedroom house 20 minutes outside the city. They had always carried themselves as comfortable people. Not flashy, but stable. The obvious solution, if they genuinely wanted to help my sister, was to bring her home. So why the urgent push to put her specifically in my 2nd bedroom? I searched the Ontario Land Registry for my parents' address. Their mortgage had been paid off in 2019. There was a newer entry, a home equity line of credit, secured against the property, registered 14 months ago. I requested the document summary. The HELOC was for $130,000. The stated purpose was home renovations. I had been at their house for a birthday dinner in the spring. Nothing had been renovated. The registration date for the HELOC was 3 weeks after my sister announced her wellness business online. I searched for sole proprietorship registrations in my sister's name in Ontario, and found one, registered within days of the credit line. I could not prove from public records that the money moved directly from their home equity into her business, but the sequence was there, and the sequence told a story. House tapped for $130,000, business launched, business failed, tenant evicted, parents suddenly desperate to redirect their daughter into my spare room rather than their own. If my sister lived with them, they would carry the HELOC and also absorb the daily overhead of 2 more adults in the house. If she lived with me, if I unknowingly absorbed all of that, they could quietly direct whatever income she and her husband brought in toward the debt, and no one would be the wiser. I made a folder on my desktop and saved everything with timestamps and source links. Then I read the message my father had sent. My grandmother's 80th birthday dinner, the following Saturday, a private room at a restaurant he had already booked. He expected me to attend. He expected me to come with a solution, his word, not mine. I thought for a day about how to handle it. Then I got in my car and drove out to see my grandmother first. She lives in a tidy townhouse near Westboro that she has kept exactly how she likes it for 20 years. She poured tea without asking whether I wanted it, and sat across from me at her kitchen table. I have always found it easier to talk to her than to most people. She asks questions and waits for the actual answer rather than the answer she was hoping for. I did not show her anything I had printed. I asked her one question: had my father asked her for any large sum of money recently? She was quiet for a moment, then she said yes. He had called about 3 weeks ago. He had described it as a time-limited investment opportunity, a small business that needed capital quickly, and asked her to release $180,000 from the family trust early. She told him she would think about it. I nodded. I said, "Please keep thinking about it. Don't commit to anything before Saturday night." She looked at me steadily. She said, "Should I be worried?" I said, "I think Saturday will answer that." She said, "All right then." That was all. On Saturday evening, I arrived at the restaurant in a blazer and dark trousers with a tote bag over my shoulder. The private room was warm and softly lit, about 20 people around a long table set with white linen. The conversation shifted when I walked in. A slight reduction in volume, a few pairs of eyes tracking me. My aunt, the one with the paragraphs, looked at me with the expression of someone expecting a scene. My cousin kept his gaze on his phone. My parents were near the head of the table, positioned on either side of my grandmother. My sister was in a cream blouse she had chosen carefully. Her husband sat beside her and did not look at anyone. Dinner went course by course. My father was charming and social in the way he always is in public, telling stories, keeping the room light. I ate and talked with my uncle, who had been the only person in the group chat who had sent me nothing at all. When I thanked him quietly for that, he looked slightly relieved. When the main course plates were cleared, my father stood up. The toast started with my grandmother. Her life, the farm near Renfrew her family had worked for 3 generations. My grandfather, what it meant to build something with your hands and hold it together with your values. For the first couple of minutes it was genuinely good. Then it turned. He began talking about what family meant. How the measure of a family was not how it performed in comfortable times, but how it held together when things got hard. How the people who showed up when it was inconvenient were the ones who deserved to be honored. He looked at me when he said the word inconvenient. He said he was proud of how far I had come. He said he knew I had a good heart underneath it all. He said he trusted that tonight I was going to do the right thing for my sister, and my mother slid a small velvet box along the tablecloth toward me, a place to deposit the key I was expected to hand over. Every person at the table looked at me. I reached into the tote bag. I took out 5 document folders, printed in color, clearly tabbed, and placed them one by one in front of my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, and my grandmother. I kept the 5th. My father said my name with a tone I recognized. I said, I thought everyone should be working from the same information before any decisions were made. I said the first document in each folder was the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board eviction order. I explained briefly what an L1 application was. I noted the filing date, 11 weeks before my sister and her husband drove a cargo van to my building, and the stated reason for the eviction, which was not a change in building ownership and not a rent increase. It was 4 consecutive months of unpaid rent. My aunt opened her folder. The second document was a selection of my sister's public social media posts organized by date, the retreat, the conference, the unboxing videos, the captions about abundance and bold decisions, posted during the same months the rent went unpaid. I did not narrate them, I let people read. The third document was the land registry record showing a $130,000 home equity line of credit on my parents' property, registered in close proximity to my sister's business launch. My mother made a sound. My grandmother placed her hand flat on the tablecloth. The room went still. She picked up her folder and read it the way she has always read everything, slowly, completely, without looking up. The restaurant on the other side of the wall kept moving. In our room, no one spoke, no one touched a fork, no one reached for a glass. When she set it down, she said she had something she wanted to share with the table. She told them about the phone call, the investment opportunity, the $180,000 from the family trust that my father had asked her to release quickly, with limited detail about where it was going. She said she had been weighing it for 3 weeks and had not been able to reconcile the urgency with the vagueness. She said she understood now. She looked at my father. She said, "You called it an investment." He started to explain. She raised one hand slightly and he stopped. She said she had been managing money and watching people for 80 years. She said she had a reasonable sense of the difference between someone asking for help and someone managing the fallout of choices they had already made. She said she was sorry my sister was in a difficult position, and she hoped that my sister and her husband would use this period to build something more stable. But she would not be releasing trust funds to solve a problem she had been asked to fund without accurate information. She looked across the table at me. She said, "You didn't need to come all this way to make a point tonight." I said, "I came because I was asked to come and hand over a key. I thought people deserved the accurate picture before that happened." She said that was the right instinct. My sister stopped performing somewhere around the second folder. My brother-in-law had been studying the tablecloth for several minutes. My mother was crying, quietly, without the theatrics she had deployed on my front step. These were smaller tears, the kind that come when a plan collapses. My father sat very still, the toast giver's confidence entirely gone, the benevolent patriarch replaced by a man who had miscalculated the room. I stayed for cake and coffee because it was my grandmother's birthday, and she had earned a proper celebration. When I got my coat, my uncle caught up with me near the exit. He said he should have asked more questions before sending a sings message. I told him it was fine. He said it wasn't really, but he appreciated me being gracious about it. 3 days later, my cousin sent an e-transfer for $200 with a note that said, "Overdue and I'm sorry." I accepted it without comment. Several of the relatives who had joined the group chat pile-on sent me private messages over the following weeks. A few were genuinely apologetic. A few were more interested in the dramatic details than in actually reckoning with what they had done. I was polite to everyone and close to none of them. I removed myself from the group chat. I have not been added back and I have not asked to be. My sister and her husband found a room to rent in Canada through a housing group online. She stopped posting about the wellness business in November and has not mentioned it since. They are not comfortable, but they are managing. And the difference between those two things is that comfortable is something I could have been pressured into providing, and managing is theirs to figure out. My parents have not been to my condo. We have spoken twice since October, both conversations short and factual, the kind of calls where you are mainly confirming that lines of communication still exist. I do not know the current state of the home equity line of credit or how they are handling it. I hope they handle it. I have stopped feeling responsible for whether they do. My grandmother visited in December. She brought a bottle of Inniskillen ice wine and a set of copper measuring cups that had been in her kitchen since before my father was born. We talked for 3 hours. At one point she said she wished she had paid closer attention to certain patterns earlier. I told her there was nothing she could have done from the outside with the information she had. She said she supposed that was true, but she could still wish it. Then she refilled my glass and changed the subject, and we talked until it was dark outside and the street below was quiet. The measuring cups hang on the rack by my stove now. I use them almost every day. They are the right weight, worn smooth in the right places, and they make the kitchen feel like it belongs to someone who has been here for years. That is what I worked for. The quiet, the particular steadiness of a space that is entirely mine, that I built on my own terms and held on to when it mattered. Nobody else has a claim on it. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody can take it back. I am not going to apologize for that. I never was.